All right, English 218. So we are in the midst of an exciting assignment sequence where you have the opportunity to write for a public audience. And so I wanted to take this opportunity just to show you a couple of articles that I think do a relatively good job of communicating scientific information and research outcomes to a public audience. And so I want to start with this graphic here that I've posted on Blackboard. And I think it does a really nice job of sort of encapsulating the different styles of communication that we have when we are researching or making knowledge and when we are sharing knowledge with the public. And so as you saw when we read our scholarly journal articles and scholarly studies, and as you will continue to see, basically that genre or that type of writing or that writing for that particular type of audience generally starts with some background information. That's generally where we see a research question derived from a literature review. So somebody has taken the time to study what the state of the art is on a particular topic and then generate a research question or an opportunity for research from that. Then they go ahead and they include some supporting details, results, and conclusions based upon those supporting details. Well, when we communicate with the public, we are basically flipping that pyramid upside down. And we want to lead with the bottom line, and we want to give them the most important and the most significant information first. We want to help them answer that ever so important question, so what? So we want to share the significance of this particular piece of information. And then if we want, we can go into the supporting details. And what that allows the reader to do is to opt in and out at various times. And that's sort of an expectation we have of the public, is that they're going to come and they're going to take the information that's most useful and most helpful to them, and then they're going to opt out. And that may just be the bottom line, that may be the bottom line and the so what, or maybe if they're so inclined and they're interested and it's a particularly important topic to them, they may read the whole thing, including the supporting details. We can assume different things about our reader when we're writing to fellow experts and other researchers or other practitioners, that they have a much greater vested interest in the topic and that they are likely to read all of the way through, and that they maybe have a higher tolerance for this model on the left. But we know the public probably does not, and so we want to try to actuate that by thinking carefully about what our bottom line is, why this matters to our reader, and how we can quickly and articulately present the supporting details. So I have a couple of articles I want to show you, and we can take a look at how they do this. For your benefit, I've also posted these as links in our week number 7 folder, and so you can take a look at these on your own, and read the articles in their entirety if you're so inclined. They're both from a website called Science Alert, which is a nice science blog that is written about by science journalists, or written by science journalists, and it includes all sorts of information, as you can see, across a range of topics, ranging from health to tech to the environment, space, and everything in between. And what they do is they present new and useful information on a range of topics. And the 2 articles I'm going to show you today are very different. This first article really is about a new research article that suggests that 1 hour of exercise a week can be enough to prevent depression, as you can see from the title. And so basically what they're doing is they're sharing this. They're turning this new study into a news item. And so they're trying to share this piece of information and then contextualize it by answering the question, so what? And so I just want to take a look at this really quickly. Obviously, having a good, engaging headline or heading is obviously really important. If you think about something like this living on an organization's blog or website, or if you think about it residing in a newsletter, or if you actually write an op-ed as a public health professional or a public intellectual into a newspaper or a magazine, having a good, thoughtful headline is often one way that we can engage the reader, and that's something I've tried to really impress upon you, is that is something that's very important for us, is that a message never delivered is not a very good message. So what I mean by that is if we don't get our reader to actually read because we bore them or because we don't show how it intersects with their life, it's not a very effective message, obviously. So here we have that. We have a pretty good headline, and we have a great subheadline, "You Don't Even Need to Sweat," which kind of gives us some sense of context. So let's read this really quickly. So it says, "We know that exercise, or even just a regular stroll outside, can have massive benefits for both our mental and physical health. But now researchers have delivered surprisingly good news on this front. A large data analysis has revealed that even 1 hour a week of any type of exercise can prevent depression in the future. And you'll notice that within this, and this because this is a web document, and this is something that I do want you to think about. They do have links to previous studies that make similar or related suggestions, and that sort of creates a web of information that might be important or helpful to the reader. And then it says, a large international team of researchers from the UK, Australia, and Norway looked at data from a huge Norwegian population health survey called HUNT, conducted between 1984 and 1997. According to the team, studies have been increasingly pointing to a link between physical activity levels and mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. But there's always the question of whether there's actually a reverse causation going on. People with mental health issues may struggle to get enough exercise in the first place. Sometimes such research also conflates depression and anxiety together, even though they can have different risk factors and biological mechanisms. That's why the team took to combing through data from Hunt in order to address the uncertainty surrounding the relationship between exercise and depression and anxiety. We've known for some time that exercise has a role to play in treating symptoms of depression, says lead researcher psychiatrist Samuel Harvey from the Black Dog Institute in the University of New South Wales in Australia. But this is the first time we have been able to quantify the preventative potential of physical activity in terms of reducing future levels of depression. So what we have here is we have the bottom line that basically they're laying out there as succinctly and as articulately and as concisely as possible what the bottom line of this particular piece of information is. So they're telling us, look, depression can be prevented to some degree by exercise, and then they give us some sense of how they figured this out. But notice they're not going into a tremendous amount of detail. They're just kind of giving us the 50,000-foot view so that we don't get overwhelmed, and they're kind of answering the question, so what? So what's novel about this? Why should we care about this? Don't we already sort of know this? And what they're saying is that this particular study kind of fills a niche. It kind of fills a gap in the research in that it helps us do a couple of things. Notice that they provide a pretty useful definition of reverse causation. I know for one that if they hadn't defined that and explained that, I would not have had any idea what that meant. And then they also talk about the problem of conflating anxiety and depression and what that means. So in addition to giving us the bottom line, they're also kind of answering the question, so what? It would be easy for a reader to read this and go, yeah, I mean, the common sense, duh, don't we already know this? But then they're also, the thing that I think is interesting is that they're making the case that you can quantify this, that you can actually identify an amount of exercise that has that preventative quality. And we won't read the whole thing, but now they're going to go into sort of the minutia or the granular detail about the study using a sample of 33,908 healthy adults, people that met these certain criteria. The researchers obtained data on the baseline level of exercise for this large group of participants. Then they looked at the Hunt study follow-up data from 9 and 13 years later, analyzing the relationship between exercise levels and results from questionnaires designed to detect symptoms. And so they kind of go into this various, and as you read on, there's more and more and more detail, and what they're essentially doing is reporting on the results of the study. But what this particular little blog post or little article does, I think, very well is that it gives us a really quick and easy to digest bottom line. It explains why this is new, novel, interesting, why we should care, what it means to the field. They probably could place a little bit more emphasis on how important it is to be able to quantify this, it's the quantitative measure that's so interesting. But by and large, I think they do a pretty good job of making this something that we can read and understand and make sense of, and also maybe use in our own day-to-day lives to improve our existence. Here's one that's a little bit different. This one is about as you can see, it's about a needle-covered patch that dissolves excess body fat. And so let's read this really quickly, and I think you'll see a very similar pattern of organization that really follows the graphic from Blackboard, which shows the bottom line, the so what, and the supporting details. So let's take a look at that. So it says, this needle-covered patch dissolves excess body fat wherever you stick it. Would you try it? And so right there again, we have some level of engagement, trying to hook the reader in to be interested in the topic. And I cannot overstate enough how important that is. That, again, because we are bombarded with so many messages, it's easy just to disregard these. So we have to do what we can to get our readers' attention. And that doesn't mean that we want to, we have to think about this ethically, and we can't exaggerate the benefits, or we can't exaggerate what we're claiming, but it does mean that we can be creative about how we engage our reader in this conversation. So here we go. A skin patch that effectively melts excess body fat wherever you decide to apply it sounds too good to be true, but this thing actually exists thanks to new research. The medicated patch uses an array of skin-piercing microneedles to deliver nanoparticles of drugs to the body, and while it hasn't yet been tested on humans, trials with mice show it reduces body fat by as much as 20% in treated areas. Developed by researchers at Columbia University and the University of North Carolina, the skin patch doesn't just hold promise and potential riches for the cosmetics industry, it could one day help us fight conditions like obesity and diabetes. The way it works has to do with how our bodies store fat, which largely comes down to two kinds of fat cells, white fat and brown fat. Brown fat is often thought of as a good fat because it readily breaks down and produces heat, which is why newborns have a lot of it, given they need help regulating their body temperature. Unfortunately for grown-ups, we don't have as much brown fat and are instead saddled with ungainly deposits of white fat around our bodies, which is used for long-term energy storage, but is not so easily burned. In recent years, there's been a huge amount of scientific effort focused around bridging the gap between the two kinds of fat, or more accurately, learning how to convert energy-storing white fat into energy-burning brown fat. A number of studies have shown success in triggering the transformation, sometimes called browning, but from a healthcare perspective, there's a problem. And the problem is there are several clinically available drugs that promote browning, but all must be given as pills or injections, says one member of the team, a pathologist named Li Qiang at Columbia University. This exposes the whole body to the drugs, which can lead to side effects such as stomach upset, weight gain, and bone fractures. Our skin patch appears to alleviate these complications by delivering most of the drugs directly to the fat tissue. This is possible due to the patch's grid of microscopic needles, which deliver browning chemicals into the skin wherever the white fat is being stored. And then they go into some of the minutiae and some of the details that, frankly, I am not qualified to read nor understand. But I think, again, you can see that general structure. There's a bottom line. Look, there's this tool. Why does it matter? Well, here's why it matters. And then they go into the supporting details. One of the things, so in that way, I think it follows the framework that we saw on that graphic. However, I do think it's worth noting that they kind of hold off on one of the most important elements of this particular breakthrough, I think. And I think they bury, this is a journalistic term, but they bury the lead a little bit. They bury the most important or the most compelling fact, which is that it could reduce side effects that people have with these sort of weight loss drugs. And so I think that might have been something that they could have included earlier, because that's really part of the bottom line, at least from my perspective, that not only is it a patch with microneedles, and not only can it really reduce fat, but it can also do it with limited side effects, which to me is really the most important thing. But other than that, I think this article does a really good job on a number of fronts. One, it follows that framework. Two, it provides enough background information and definitions and sort of supporting information so that we really understand what they're talking about. It would have been really easy for this to be very, very technical, but notice they avoid that by holding off on some of the particular drugs that were used and some of the particular techniques until later in the article, and they don't go too overboard with the physiology of it all, but really what they're trying to do is just share something that's happened. Please pardon that disgusting advertisement about that bugs. It's pretty gross. But suffice it to say, I think both of these articles take a piece of research that was published in an academic journal, that was written in very technical language for a very technical audience, and they make that information meaningful to an everyday reader. And I think that that's the gold standard for what we could do. And I actually think that there are people in this class who can do better than both of these, but these were just two examples that I had read recently and I thought were worth sharing. Because they were so different in terms of what they were sharing for knowledge, but also that they kind of use slightly different approaches while using the same framework. So I think that should give you some sense of what we're up against. And so if you haven't yet, I would encourage you to take a look at your topic proposals. I gave some of you just got the straight ahead green light. I said, go ahead, have at it. That sounds like a great topic. Some of you, I gave you some advice on how you might be able to refine that topic a little bit. But effectively what we're going to do is we're going to start working on drafting these, and we're going to start with your lead. And so your lead, or your first couple of paragraphs, really should present that bottom line of your article, whether you're persuading or whether you're informing, in a really succinct interesting way that's going to grab the reader's attention and that really encapsulates and forecasts what that article is about. And doing that is not as easy as it sounds, and so you're probably going to go through multiple drafts of this, and ultimately what I want to see is the best version that you can come up with so that I can give you some feedback on it. And if you want, and if you need inspiration, I would encourage you to buzz around Science Alert and take a look at the way that they handle topics across a range of areas of interest, and you can see a variety of different lead strategies. And you can also, of course, consult our readings from a week or two ago that really discuss different strategies for leading into a scientific article. And so you can tell a story, you can include a startling statistic, you can do all sorts of different things, but the key is to really try to pull that reader in and to try to give them a sense of what that particular piece of writing is about. Because again, for the fourth time, I think in this short lecture, I can't stress enough how important it is to engage the reader and to make this intersect with their life in some meaningful way. So please keep that in mind. Bottom line, so what? Supporting details. Think about that inverted pyramid, and we will be in a good spot. So thanks a lot.